There is a moment in every man's life when something inside him shuts off, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of clarity. He sees the truth with a level of sharpness that burns away every illusion he used to cling to. He stops chasing. He stops proving. He stops explaining. And the world around him reacts instantly. The temperature drops. The air changes. His silence becomes heavier than any argument he ever made. Control is silent. This is the moment a man realizes that his greatest mistake was giving too much of himself to people who gave almost nothing back. He sees how his availability became a trap, how his kindness was taken as weakness, how his constant effort turned him invisible. And then, like a switch being flipped, he withdraws, not as punishment, but as survival. Attention is currency, and he stops spending it where there is no return. Women feel this shift before they understand it. They sense the sudden lack of emotional warmth, and it destabilizes them. The man who once responded in seconds now takes his time. The man who once filled the silence now lets it speak for him. The man who once tried to be chosen now becomes the one who chooses. Power changes hands without a single word. Distance creates reverence. This is not cruelty. It is self-preservation. It is the moment a man stops operating from fear of loss and begins to operate from a place of internal order. He steps out of the emotional fog that kept him dependent and steps into the clarity that makes him dangerous. Coldness is clarity. You can't manipulate a man who no longer needs your approval. And here is the paradox. The moment he pulls back to protect his identity, something awakens on the other side. The same woman who felt secure in his affection now feels insecure in his silence. The same woman who judged him as predictable now sees him as unpredictable. The same woman who overlooked him now watches him closely. Desire rises when certainty falls. Mystery is fuel. This shift reveals a truth most men never understand. It isn't your smile that creates desire. It isn't your affection. It isn't your effort. It's the possibility of losing you. It's the sudden drop in emotional temperature that activates instincts she didn't know she had. Scarcity creates value. And when you stop offering yourself freely, she starts investing. The moment the temperature drops is not about games. It is the rebirth of a man who refuses to be pulled by anyone's emotional gravity. He becomes grounded in himself. He becomes stable. He becomes untouchable. And that is when feminine desire ignites with unexpected intensity. Coldness is power. Withdrawal is strategy. Sovereignty begins the moment you stop chasing what was never running toward you. Power is born from withdrawal. Power begins the moment a man understands the value of what he withholds. Most men try to influence women by adding more attention, more affection, more reassurance, more effort. But the truth is brutal and simple. Women are far more affected by what a man stops giving than by what he continues to offer. Presence creates comfort. Distance creates impact. This isn't manipulation. This is human nature. A woman feels desire rise not when a man pours himself out, but when he becomes selective with his energy. When his attention shifts from automatic to intentional. When he no longer reacts to every message, every mood, every emotional pull. The moment he withdraws, she feels it in her nervous system. Emotional scarcity shifts the balance of power instantly. Attraction is not built on abundance. It is built on rarity. Attention is currency. Investment creates value. This is the principle Machiavelli understood with mathematical precision. People respect what they cannot easily access. Familiarity softens desire. Predictability weakens influence. When a man is always available, his presence loses weight. But when he steps back calmly, silently, confidently, he forces the other person to confront their own dependence. Distance reveals truth. A man who withdraws stops playing defense and starts playing strategy. He protects his emotional core instead of placing it in the hands of someone who hasn't earned it. He moves from reactive to sovereign. He becomes a man who is no longer shaped by her moods or her approval. Power is calm. Authority is quiet. Control is created by what you do not give. Withdrawal is the moment a man stops trying to be chosen and becomes the one who chooses. And the shift is immediate. The dynamic reorganizes itself around him. Her curiosity rises. Her attention sharpens. Her emotional calculation changes. She realizes the man she took for granted cannot be bent. This awakening is the foundation of desire. The forbidden truth is simple. The man who holds himself back is the man who ends up being pursued. Distance creates reverence. The desire triggered by emotional ambiguity. A woman's desire is not sparked by comfort. It is sparked by tension. Emotional certainty calms her, but it doesn't ignite her. What ignites her is ambiguity. The unknown, the unpredictable, the man she can't fully read, the man whose emotional temperature she cannot control. This instability is not chaos, it is stimulation. Curiosity becomes attention. Attention becomes desire. Desire becomes obsession. Emotional ambiguity is fuel. When a man becomes colder, calmer, more distant, something shifts inside her. She feels a psychological disruption. The pattern she relied on breaks. The emotional script she used no longer works. And the moment she cannot predict him, she cannot ignore him. Mystery activates the ancient circuitry of feminine attraction. The shadow woman awakens, the part of her drawn to danger, uncertainty, and the man who stands slightly outside her control. Control kills passion. Uncertainty resurrects it. This instability is not the result of cruelty. It is the result of detachment. When a man no longer reacts instantly, she begins to react for both of them. When he no longer fills silence, she fills it with imagination. When he becomes harder to read, she becomes more expressive, more emotional, more invested. Silence forces her mind to answer questions she never asked before. Coldness forces her heart to reconsider what she felt. Women feel desire strongest when they are emotionally off balance. Not harmed, not mistreated, but challenged, stimulated, pulled into a psychological space where they must earn what they previously received for free. Attraction is a negotiation of uncertainty. Security creates peace, but peace alone cannot generate longing. Longing comes from imbalance. Desire lives where certainty dies. This is why the man who tries too hard loses impact. She feels too safe, too sure, too in control. There is no tension, no spark, no emotional chase. But the man who holds back disrupts this balance. His restraint forces her to step forward. His coldness forces her warmth. His unpredictability forces her investment. She does not desire the man who is always there. She desires the man she must reach for. Why women value what they might lose? Desire is not an emotion. It is a biological alarm system. It activates when something valuable is at risk. A woman does not value a man because he is present. She values him when his presence is not guaranteed. This is how the female brain is wired to measure male worth. Rarity signals strength. Unpredictability signals independence. And independence signals genetic superiority. Coldness becomes a biological message. I don't need your validation to exist. That message is powerful. When a man withdraws, he triggers ancient evolutionary instincts. In nature, the male who is difficult to claim is the male with options, freedom, and status. The male who is not easily impressed. The male who is not easily influenced. This man represents security, potential, and advantage. The man who is always available signals the opposite. Familiarity lowers his perceived value. Predictability makes him emotionally cheap. Nothing rare can remain undervalued. Coldness simulates high genetic value because it communicates self-sufficiency. A man who is not emotionally dependent projects abundance. He becomes a psychological outlier. And scarcity creates pursuit. It forces the mind to detect meaning where there was none. It forces the heart to intensify what it previously ignored. Women value what they fear losing. This is not manipulation. This is biology. The female brain reacts to scarcity the same way it reacts to competition, risk, and opportunity. The emotional tension created by a man's withdrawal activates the reward circuitry. It mirrors the risk-reward loop found in addictive behavior. The less predictable the outcome, the more intense the emotional investment. Mystery increases dopamine. Uncertainty increases desire. Distance increases pursuit. A woman chasing clarity invests emotionally. A woman seeking reassurance attaches deeply. A woman afraid of losing a man begins to see him as valuable, even if she once overlooked him. Coldness transforms him from an option into a prize. The lesson is simple. Availability is comfortable, but comfort never creates desire. Desire grows where scarcity exists. Attraction deepens where certainty collapses. Women value the man they might lose, not the man they never risk losing. Value appears when presence becomes uncertain. Why a hint of disdain intensifies desire. There is a forbidden truth most men never learn. Women do not desire the man they can emotionally dominate. Affection alone does not create attraction. Warmth alone does not create impact. The man she can fully control becomes emotionally weightless. She respects him as a friend, but she does not hunger for him. Desire requires polarity, and polarity often begins with a subtle, almost invisible form of emotional distance, controlled disdain. Contempt, when used without hostility, is not hatred. It is the quiet message that you cannot be owned. It is the refusal to participate in her emotional chaos. It is the moment you stop rewarding bad behavior, stop apologizing for things you didn't do, stop bending your identity to avoid conflict. Contempt is simply this: I will not lower myself to earn your approval. That message hits deeper than compliments ever will. Respect begins where compliance ends. Gentlemen attract admiration. Cold gentlemen attract desire. Cold men with a trace of dignified disdain awaken something deeper, obsession. Because disdain communicates a truth she cannot ignore. You are not afraid to lose her. And the man who is not afraid to lose a woman becomes the man she fears losing. This is where psychology turns dark and honest. Freud called it repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to chase the emotional pattern that once caused pain. Many women are drawn to the man who awakens this unresolved tension, not because they want to suffer, but because the emotional instability creates intensity. A man who stands firm, who doesn't fold under pressure, who doesn't react to every emotional spike, he becomes the mirror she cannot manipulate. And mirrors create self-awareness. Your subtle disdain forces her to confront her own behavior. It destabilizes the part of her that expects instant validation. It challenges the part that wants dominance. This friction becomes desire. Control dies where resistance begins, and resistance creates fire. The paradox is brutal but accurate. The man who cares too much loses power. The man who cares too little loses connection. But the man who values himself above all, who can look at her with calm indifference when needed, creates the exact tension that ignites pursuit. When you stop fearing loss, he starts fearing your absence. The man who cannot be pulled. A woman becomes truly drawn to a man when she realizes she cannot move him. Not with pressure, not with silence, not with seduction, not with emotional storms. The moment she sees that her tactics, conscious or unconscious, fail to shake his center, something fundamental shifts inside her. Respect emerges, then curiosity, then desire. Stability is seductive. Self-sufficiency is magnetic. A man who fuels himself becomes a gravitational force. Most men lose their power because they rely on external validation to feel grounded. They need the message, the reassurance, the affection, the attention. This dependence makes them predictable. Predictability makes them easy to control. And the man who can be controlled loses the psychological polarity that creates attraction. Emotional dependence is the death of masculine influence. Freedom is the root of it. A self-sufficient man is different. He stands on his own internal foundation. His identity does not crumble when she withdraws. His confidence does not break when she tests him. His direction remains steady regardless of her opinions. He does not chase emotional soothing because he generates his own stability. A man who is whole is a man who cannot be owned. This autonomy creates a powerful dynamic. She must rise to meet his standard instead of dragging him into her emotional rhythm. His calm forces her intensity. His clarity forces her vulnerability. His independence forces her investment. Women instinctively pursue men whose emotional centers they cannot easily access. Why? Because rarity amplifies value. Because strength awakens the feminine impulse to attach. Because self-sufficiency signals leadership and certainty. Stoic resilience plays a role here. A man who governs himself becomes impossible to manipulate. He doesn't react to provocation. He doesn't collapse under disappointment. He doesn't bargain for affection. His silence carries weight because it isn't a tactic, it's who he is. Control your mind and no one controls you. This self-fueled presence rewires the dynamics entirely. She begins to lean in. She begins to open up. She begins to chase clarity instead of offering it. Not because he demanded anything, but because his strength creates a psychological space she wants to enter. Desire is drawn to stability. Respect is drawn to discipline. And only a self-sufficient man offers both. How coldness creates a psychological economy. Coldness is not an attitude. It is an economy. The moment a man stops giving unlimited access to his attention, everything shifts. Attention is the most valuable currency in the emotional market, and most men spend it recklessly. They give it freely, constantly, desperately. And anything given without limits loses its value. Scarcity creates demand. Demand creates desire. Desire creates pursuit. Coldness is the system that activates all three at once. When a man becomes colder, he instantly alters the emotional market around him. His messages become rare. His presence becomes unpredictable. His reactions become selective. And women respond to this shift with heightened perception. The human mind assigns greater value to whatever feels limited. This is not cultural conditioning. It is neurological fact. The brain links scarcity to importance. What is rare becomes powerful. Coldness prevents the inflation of your value. Too much availability devalues you the same way printing too much money destroys a currency. Scarcity tightens the emotional supply, forcing her to reassess what she once took for granted. She becomes more intentional, more observant, more invested. She begins to compete internally for the attention she once ignored. Value rises when access declines. This loop is powerful because it works on instinct. The female mind is wired to notice emotional shifts, especially decreases in male investment. The less you give, the more she imagines. The more she imagines, the more she feels. The more she feels, the more she pursues. This is not manipulation. It is the nature of human desire. People chase what feels limited and dismiss what feels guaranteed. Coldness does something even deeper. It forces her to self-regulate. Instead of waiting for your approval, she works for it. Instead of expecting your presence, she earns it. Instead of controlling the emotional pace, she adapts to yours. This shift creates a dynamic where she becomes the active participant and you become the gravitational pull. She revolves around your tempo, not the other way around. The scarcity loop is simple but ruthless. When you stop offering yourself freely, she starts valuing you intensely. When you stop being predictable, she starts paying attention. When you stop giving everything, she starts giving more. Coldness is not about punishing her. It's about protecting the value of your presence. A man who understands this never begs for respect. He creates it. Confusing coldness with hostility, most men fail at coldness because they misunderstand it completely. They think coldness means being rude, distant, aggressive, or emotionally shut down. They turn silence into punishment. They turn distance into revenge. They turn indifference into ego. And every time it backfires. Hostility doesn't create desire. Hostility kills it. It triggers defense, resentment, and emotional withdrawal. Anger is noise. Power is quiet. Coldness is not an attack. It is alignment. It is the man returning to his center. It is the removal of unnecessary effort. It is the trimming of emotional excess. Real coldness is clean, controlled, grounded. A man who is cold in the right way does not raise his voice. He does not insult. He does not provoke. He does not weaponize affection. He simply refuses to be pulled out of himself. Hostility is reactive. Coldness is intentional. Hostility comes from insecurity. Coldness comes from conviction. A hostile man is trying to prove something. A cold man has nothing to prove. When you control your reactions, you control the relationship. Women are not attracted to cruelty. They are drawn to restraint, to composure, to the man who does not crumble when he is tested. Emotional coldness, when authentic, communicates two powerful messages. First, I am not moved by chaos. Second, your emotions do not dictate my value. These truths shift the dynamic instantly. They eliminate the space for manipulation. They dismantle the emotional leverage she might have held. A man who can remain calm under pressure becomes psychologically dominant without ever raising his voice. The mistake men make is trying to look cold instead of being cold. Pretending is loud. Authenticity is quiet. Coldness is not a performance. It is the natural state of a man who refuses to negotiate his self-respect. The moment he stops explaining himself, stops defending his worth, stops reacting to emotional extremes, something inside her shifts. She feels the change. She feels the distance. She feels the strength. And strength awakens desire. Hostility destroys connection. Coldness rewires it. A woman cannot desire a man she fears, but she can desire a man she cannot shake. The goal is not to create pain. The goal is to create boundaries. Boundaries generate respect. Respect generates attraction. And attraction generates pursuit. Coldness is discipline. Hostility is weakness disguised as strength. Only one creates desire. How to apply strategic emotional distance. Strategic emotional distance is not a game. It is the disciplined practice of refusing to lose yourself in the emotional storms of others. Most men think distance means ignoring her or playing silent games. That is childish. Strategic distance is precision. It is the controlled removal of excess effort. It is the refusal to over-explain, over-pursue, or over-give. It is the art of doing less while increasing impact. Power is preserved through restraint. A man who applies emotional distance correctly does not cut her off. He simply stops bending. He speaks with fewer words. He reacts with fewer impulses. He chooses presence instead of pursuit. He notices everything but responds only to what deserves his energy. This selective engagement creates tension. And tension creates desire. One of the core principles here is linguistic precision. When you reduce words, your presence gains weight. When you stop explaining every move, she fills the gaps with imagination. When you stop justifying your decisions, you shift the power dynamic immediately. Justification is submission. Silence is authority. When you stop defending yourself, the world defends you differently. Strategic distance also means refusing to chase reconciliation. Most men panic when a woman pulls away. They send long messages, apologies, declarations. Each act lowers their value. A man with internal sovereignty does not run after emotional safety. He lets the silence speak. He lets the distance burn away what is false. He trusts the truth to surface without force. Distance reveals loyalty. Another core element is controlling the pace of interaction. When you slow down your responses, you slow down her certainty. When you give space instead of instant reassurance, you activate her pursuit instinct. When you become less available, you become more valuable. Scarcity is not cruelty. Scarcity is conservation of energy. Strategic distance is also about reducing emotional visibility. You stop reacting to provocations. You stop mirroring her moods. You stop feeding the drama loop. When you refuse to escalate, you remove her ability to control the dynamic emotionally. Calm men cannot be manipulated. Composed men cannot be moved. If your emotions are not accessible, your value becomes undeniable. This execution is not about punishing her. It is about protecting yourself. It is about ensuring that you never give so much that you become the weaker force. Emotional distance is the masculine version of self-respect. When applied correctly, it reverses the dynamic without hostility. It makes her step forward. It makes her feel the gap, and once she feels it, she begins to bridge it. The moment she switches, there is a moment in every dynamic where the energy turns. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, but the shift is undeniable. The man withdraws to protect himself, and she begins to reorganize emotionally to avoid losing him. This is the inversion point, the psychological flip where desire stops flowing outward from him and starts flowing toward him. Women do not chase men who overextend themselves. They chase the men they fear drifting away. Desire begins where certainty ends. When a man pulls back, 3 pillars of her emotional world collapse: access, validation, and predictability. He is no longer easy to reach. He no longer reacts instantly. He no longer feeds her need for constant reassurance. The loss of immediate emotional supply creates anxiety, and anxiety converts into attention. Attention converts into longing. Longing converts into pursuit. This is not manipulation. This is the natural equilibrium of attraction rebalancing itself. The switch happens when she realizes the emotional gravity is no longer in her hands. She feels the absence more than she appreciated the presence. She starts analyzing her own behavior. She questions her assumptions. She replays old conversations. She wonders why he feels different, stronger, quieter. The feminine mind is highly sensitive to shifts in male investment. When that investment drops, uncertainty rises, and uncertainty is powerful. She begins to reach out more. Her messages become faster. Her tone becomes softer. Her curiosity intensifies. She initiates conversations she once ignored. She begins seeking clarity, reassurance, connection. Her emotional efforts increase because she now senses the possibility of loss. The man she once felt comfortable replacing suddenly becomes the man she fears losing. Scarcity awakens desire. Fear awakens commitment. The turning point is not about dominance. It is about restoration of balance. A woman invests where she feels emotional risk. She pursues where she senses value. She attaches where she perceives stability and independence. Coldness exposes her true level of interest because women do not chase what they do not want. They do not pursue what they do not fear losing. This switch changes everything. The dynamic becomes aligned. The emotional weight shifts back to the man who stands firm. She steps forward because she cannot pull him out of his center. She leans in because he no longer leans out of insecurity. The man becomes the axis. She becomes the movement around him. When you withdraw for the right reasons, she returns for the real ones. Coldness as sovereignty, not strategy. Coldness only works when it is not a technique but a truth. When it raises from identity, not insecurity. When it reflects a man's inner order, not his fear of being hurt. The moment coldness becomes a performance, it loses its power. The moment it becomes a mask, it becomes transparent. Women can feel authenticity instinctively. They chase the man who is grounded in himself, not the man pretending to be. Coldness rooted in sovereignty is different. It is calm, not forced. It is stable, not reactive. It is the natural expression of a man who refuses to negotiate his value. He does not elevate himself by lowering others. He does not create fear. He creates boundaries. And boundaries generate respect. Respect becomes desire. Desire becomes loyalty. A man who owns himself cannot be owned by anyone. This type of coldness is stoic in nature. It comes from understanding that emotions are signals, not commands. It comes from refusing to be pulled into someone else's instability. It comes from choosing clarity over chaos, purpose over approval, identity over attachment. The man who stands in his center becomes a fortress, not closed off, but selective. Not detached from life, but detached from emotional dependency. There is a deeper psychological truth here. Coldness forces a woman to face her own inner world. It reflects her patterns, her fears, her projections. It forces introspection. It brings her into a space where she must decide, step up or step away. Both outcomes protect the man. Coldness filters. It removes the unstable and attracts the committed. This sovereignty is not about winning a power game. It is about preserving your mind. When a man stops chasing approval, he starts choosing responsibility. When he stops reacting emotionally, he starts thinking strategically. When he stops fearing loss, he starts creating direction. You cannot lead a relationship if you cannot lead yourself. Coldness rooted in sovereignty is a declaration. My value is not up for negotiation, and the world responds differently to men who carry that truth. Women respond differently. They lean in. They respect more. They invest more. Not because he manipulates, but because he is anchored. He stands firm in who he is. And a stable man is always a rare man. This is the real reason coldness attracts. It signals power. It signals discipline. It signals the will to stand alone if necessary. And nothing is more magnetic to the feminine than a man who does not fear his own solitude. When you master yourself, you master the dynamic. When you own your value, the world reorganizes around it. The price of being chased. Every man wants to be pursued, but few understand the cost of becoming the one who is chased. You cannot step into that position without sacrificing the version of yourself that was built on neediness, insecurity, and emotional dependence. You cannot be the man women run after while still being the man who runs after validation. There is a price for power, and the price is the death of who you used to be. You must let go of weakness to step into authority. Coldness is not about punishing women. It is about purifying yourself. Every withdrawal cuts away another layer of attachment. Every moment of silence strengthens your spine. Every refusal to chase reinforces your identity. You begin to realize that you were never lacking value. You were lacking boundaries. And the moment you stop offering yourself cheaply, the world pays full price. But there is a deeper truth. Becoming the man who is chased changes the way you relate to desire itself. You stop seeking excitement in emotional chaos. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop needing attention to feel alive. You operate from direction, not from impulse. You pursue purpose, not approval. You no longer crumble when someone pulls away. Your value stops fluctuating based on affection. You become steady, and steadiness is rare. Being chaste forces a shift in the dynamic of every relationship you enter. Women interact with you differently. They invest more. They open more. They attach deeper. Not because you demanded anything, but because your discipline created polarity. They chase because your identity is grounded. They desire because your presence is selective. They move toward you because you no longer move toward everyone. The price of being chaste is the responsibility that comes with it. You must stay aligned. You must stay calm. You must stay sovereign. The world tests every man who holds power. Women test him. Life tests him. Weakness is always waiting for an opening. One slip into neediness destroys the dynamic instantly. Power is maintained by discipline, not ego. When you become the man who is truly chaste, you understand something most men never realize. The real reward is not attention from women. The real reward is the internal transformation that made you chaseable. It is the clarity, the self-respect, the emotional independence, the sense of identity that cannot be shaken. To awaken desire is easy. To sustain respect is another war. Only the cold man wins both.